Welcome students. Today the topic of the video is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. It is the second chapter for 12th standard biology students. Please go through the video and try to understand the important processes or the phenomena discussed within this chapter. The topic included within this fraction of video of this chapter is a general study of flower, which is the sexually reproducing part of plants, generally the higher plants. The second topic which is included within the content of the video is the steps included in sexual reproduction in higher plants. We will go through each of the topic in bit detail for better understanding of the students. Please make a note wherever you have any queries and ask at the end if you can contact. Let's move forward with the starting with the topic flower. Flower is the main reproductive part of angiospermic plants. As we have already studied the plant kingdom earlier in 11th standard, we know that the plant kingdom is basically divided into 5 subkingdoms or subphylums, 5 phylums, which are algae, thallophyta, also known as thallophyta, bryophyta, pteridophyta, which are the cryptogams, and the phanerogams are 2, that is the gymnosperms and the angiospermic plants. Gymnosperms, they produce naked seeds and do not have flowering structures. They have cones as their reproductive structures. When it comes to the angiospermic plants, the flower is the main reproductive part of angiospermic plants. Following are the adaptations of flower to complete their life cycle. The flowering plants produce seeds which encode the embryo. That is, the embryo is present inside these flowering plants. The flowering plants go through the process of pollination, in which the exchange of male and female gamete takes place. There is absence of motility of the gametes. The gametes cannot move on their own as it was possible for bryophyta and thallophyta, that is with the help of water stream. Here for pollination various agents are required, which will be discussed in the further parts of the coming videos. Let's move forward. The gametophytic generation is short-lived. The gametophytic generation is the part of the plant life which produces gametes. As the utilization of gametes is over, the generation ends over there. This generation comprises of the flower as the main component of the plant body. Next, we move to advantages of sexual reproduction. It involves fusion of the male gamete and the female gamete, resulting in a new genetic recombination. This genetic recombination helps in better adaptability of the plant to the adverse environmental conditions, as a result of which the plants undergo the course of evolution. Why? This happens because of the development of new characters in the offspring. Capacity of adoption is more. These are the advantages of sexual reproduction. The only disadvantages are it requires 2 individuals, which is not seen in asexual mode of reproduction, and the variation of offsprings is due to possibility of removal of basic character. Let's move to the next slide. This slide of the video deals with the study of the chromosome number. We all know that there are 2 sets of chromosomes in an organism, which is known as diploid set of chromosomes. But when it comes to gametes, the chromosome number just gets halved by the process of meiosis cell division. That is known as haploid set of chromosomes. This haploid set of chromosomes can be converted to diploid in the zygote after the process of fertilization. This helps in restoring the chromosome number in an organism after the process of sexual reproduction. As a result of which, the chromosome number in any living organism, and when we talk about in this chapter in flowering plants, remain constant. The angiospermic plant exhibits two alternation in generation. We already have studied in 11th standard that alternation of generation in the life cycles of plant bodies takes place. They can be by haplontic method, diplontic method, or haplodiplontic method. The angiospermic plants possess two generations in their life cycle because of this alternation in generation. As we have already mentioned that the gametophytic generation is short-lived, the major generation of the life cycle of angiosperm is sporophytic. That is in the form of complete plant body, which comprises of root, stem, and flowers and leaves. It is the free living phase of the plant body. This can be discussed in the form of a flow chart which shows the outline of life cycle of angiosperm. Here we go with the slide in the next coming slide showing the life cycle of angiosperm. A flowering plant, when it is in sporophytic stage, is diploid, that is 2n. This diploid plant generates a sexually reproductive part which is flower. This flower. The flower comprises of the male part, which we will be discussing further as androecium, and the female part, which we will be discussing further as gynoecium. The androecium is also 2n and gynoecium is also 2n. Their major reproductive organ, the stamen and the carpel, are also in diploid condition, that is 2n. The stamen has a sac-like structure which is carrying the male gamete known as pollen or microspores. That sac is also in 2n condition. The ovules which carry the female gamete are also in diploid condition. As the process of meiosis takes place individually in the male part and the female part, the microspores or the pollen grains develop, which are the haploid gametes. And from ovules, the egg cell or the megaspore develops. The fusion of this male gametophyte, microspore, and megaspore, the female gametophyte, this female gametophyte, lead to formation of egg, secondary nucleus, male gamete 1 and male gamete 2 from these male gamete and female gamete respectively. Egg and the secondary nucleus result in formation of zygote, which develops into an embryo. The male gamete 1 and 2, the male gamete 2 helps in the formation of endosperm. It is the nutritive structure encovering the zygote or the embryo which provide nutrition to this. All this structure together comprise the haploid seed or diploid seed. This diploid seed, when it is left for germination, generates the whole plant body, which is again a sporophyte. So here we see that gametophytic stage is only linked or stopped till this area, this part. Okay, therefore the flowering plant comprises majorly of sporophytic stage. Let's move to the structure of a typical flower. This is the structure of a typical flower. It is showing the transverse section of a flower. We can see the following parts, which are the pedicel, this pedicel, the thalamus, placenta, petal and sepal, stigma style ovary as pistil, anther and filament as stamen, locules, ovules. Now we will be going through each of this structure and knowing about each of these worlds. Basically, the structure of a flower comprises of four worlds. They are: first is calyx, second is corolla, third is androecium, and fourth is gynoecium. The calyx is the green color part of the flower which encloses the flower in bud stage and protects the internal reproductive organs. The flower is the bright colored or sometimes non-colored structure. The flower's petal is the brightly colored or sometimes non-colored structure which also helps in enclosing the internal structure. Whole flower and the internal structures reside at the base of at the head or sometimes at the base of thalamus or pedicel. Pedicel is the stalk of the flower. Thus, we can say that these structures or these worlds of the flower are accessory. That is, they just help in protecting the major organs. The two most important and the major organs of the plant's flower are stamen and pistil. Stamen comprises of an anther and a filament. The pistil comprises of ovary, stigma, and style. Or we can say in a sequence that is stigma, style, and ovary. In the coming slide, we will be discussing each of this male reproductive part and female reproductive part in detail. Let's see the structure of a stamen. The stamen, just as a flower, has a stalk known as filament which holds the pollen sac. The pollen sac or the pollen chambers are present as shown as a transverse section or a longitudinal section of the stamen in the third diagram. These pollen chambers contain these microspores or the pollens. There are four chambers which are interconnected to each other with the help of a structure known as connective. In different flowers, different types of pollen stamen structures are found. Sometimes they are bilobed or sometimes they have more than two lobes. Therefore, there can be different types of stamens. In some flowers, the number of stamens may be many, or in some flowers, they may be limited to 1 to 10. The examples we can take in which we have 4 stamens are in tulsi plant, ocimum, 5 stamens in datura and brinjal plants, 6 in mustard, and infinite number of stamens in China rose. The structure of the anther, which is connecting with the filament, is known as microsporangium. This is known as microsporangium because it carries the microspore within it. Now let us move to the structure of the female reproductive part, that is gynoecium. The gynoecium is a pot-like structure generally present at the base or the head of the thalamus. If it is present at the base of the thalamus, it is known as hypogynous, or if it is present at the head of the thalamus, it is known as epigynous. We can see the difference of this epigynous and hypogynous reproductive gynoecium in the flowers of coriander and in the flowers of China rose plant, in the China rose flower. The gynoecium is divided into basically 3 parts known as stigma, style, and ovary. These 3 structures together compile up to be called as carpels or pistil. The stigma is the sticky part generally of the gynoecium, on top of which the compatible pollen grain falls. Compatible pollen grain means every plant has male gamete and female gamete both. They may be in monoecious form or in dioecious form. Now the stigma needs to recognize whether the pollen grain which has fallen on it is of that plant species or not. Therefore, this stigma which receives the pollen grains which stick on its surface can only germinate inside the gynoecium if they are compatible pollen grains. Now let's move to the next part, that is the style. The style is the long tube-like structure through which the pollen tube develops of the compatible pollen grain. This pollen tube reaches the inside of the carpel which contains the ovary, the structure which encloses the ovule. Ovule is the structure which is also known as megaspore. Thus, the complete structure of ovary can also be known as megasporangium, and the carpel can be regarded as megasporophyll, a modified megasporophyll. Let's move to the next content of the video, the next part of our topic, that is what are all the steps included in the sexual reproduction of higher plants. Following steps takes place. First is microsporogenesis and megasporogenesis, that is development of the male and the female gamete, anther and the ovules. Second is the process of pollination, that is transfer of pollen grains. Third is the development of the male and the female gametophyte. Next is the gametogenesis, that is formation of gametes. Next is the process of fertilization, that is the fusion of the male nucleus and the female nucleus, whether it is the egg cell or the endosperm nucleus. And lastly, the process of development of embryo, which is known as embryogenesis. We will be discussing each of these steps in a very detailed manner in the coming sections of the chapters videos. Till then, the students are advised to solve the following questions which are coming at the end of this video. The questions are written here which follow as: describe the structure of a typical flower, what is haplontic and diplontic life cycle, what is alternation of generation, describe general life cycle of an angiosperm, give account on androecium, give account on carpel, describe the important steps of sexual reproduction in higher plants. That's all for the content of this video. Thank you.